Hi there and welcome to Lorena's Labyrinth, or welcome back, whatever the case may be. My name's Anah and today we're going to be talking about Reiki or energy healing, or I should say and energy healing, because Reiki is what is referred to as a healing modality, and there's lots of them around. You may have heard of Reiki, but Reiki is a specific healing modality which refers to a Japanese form of healing, which we'll talk about in a little while. But to that end, I've actually put up my list of qualifications here, in some ways to give credibility to the content that I'm going to give to you. Obviously, you can see up here I am attuned to Reiki or Usui, if I can speak, Usui Reiki to teacher level and Tibetan Reiki to teacher level. I've also done what some people call Sekhem or Seishem Reiki as well. And I can also teach Kundalini Reiki and Sacred Petra, and I'm a practitioner of Isis Reiki. Now these, if you want to call them qualifications, they haven't been gathered overnight. This has been over a number of years. I did my first attunement in Usui back in year 2000, and I'm only putting them up so that you know, right? Because I personally, I'm not a big believer in a piece of paper where energy work and metaphysics is concerned. I don't believe that a piece of paper actually says that a person is good at what they do. Just because they've got this piece of paper saying that they're a Reiki teacher doesn't necessarily make them ethical or professional even in how they approach things. Now, there is a Reiki Institute. I'm not a member of it, just putting that straight up there. None of my teachers ever have been. That is a Western concept. Reiki is Japanese. So we've always had a little bit of conflict around, is there a need to have a Reiki Institute? I don't believe there is, but some people will. But having said that, I don't build my business. I don't have a business around being a Reiki practitioner or teacher. These are just, if you like, extra strings to my bow. So I would imagine, I guess, if I had some kind of premises where I was delivering Reiki services or a Reiki school, then probably it would be advisable to, certainly within the Western field, to be part of that institute. So I'm not saying don't join it. I'm just saying for me, it's never been relevant. Now, the other thing that I want to make clear here is in regard to these qualifications I've got put up here, I don't like the word master because to me it's a little condescending. So I just call myself a teacher. Okay. So just to clarify and get back to where this video is going to go, Reiki is just one, and this video is going to be more info educational. I draw upon different energy modalities in the course of my work, and that can include colour and crystal healings, invocation, power of word and prayer, and so forth. And just so I don't, goodness me, I hope you didn't hear that motorbike go past. I might have to close my front door. I like to have the front door open because I get some fresh air. But anyway, just so I don't mislead you and take you down a rabbit warren, just to remind you, I didn't do all of these overnight. These learnings were garnered over decades, if you like. It's probably a better description. It did. It took me decades to get all these skills. So basically, regardless of the healing modality that a person uses, the aim of all of healing is to direct healing energy toward the auric body and to the chakras. So as you see here, the chakras are lineal, like they go up the spine, or they're like, if you were to compare the aura or the auric body to the physical body, the chakra system there is kind of like the body's spine. And as with the body, if a vertebrae goes out of alignment, it's going to impact on the rest of the body's capacity to function. People might struggle, they feel pain, that's going to affect their mind, all of that kind of stuff. So the purpose of energy work is to balance the chakra system so that the auric body can be stabilized for optimal health. Now, I've loaded a number of videos already about auras and chakras, and I'll pop a link into the description if you want to revisit that yourself in your own time. So there are heaps and heaps of different healing modalities that use energy or draw upon energy, and I've just put some examples of them here. So crystals and crystal healing and crystal therapy is obviously right up there. I love crystals, I've got to say. I don't just use them for healing, I actually use crystals as part of gaining messages and insight when I'm delivering psychic services, if you like, for a better description. The use of colour, energy healing with colour, is generally called chromotherapy, although there may be other names to it, and I'm sure somebody's going to put it up there. There's lots of different ways of doing sound healing as well, because apparently each chakra relates to a tone. You will have seen this in the chakra videos that I've put up, the solfeggio tones. You can also do vocal toning of the chakras. Some people use gongs. I'm not a fan of gongs. Each to their own. I know people that absolutely love them, but for me, it's kind of like, it actually becomes almost painful for me if I'm listening to gonging. Tibetan bells and Tibetan bowls, I really love both of those types. Another type of healing is, of course, did I say angels? Because that's one of my favourite ones. More mainstream ones tend to be things like EMF, electromagnetic frequency, aromatherapy. Craniosacral is another one, which actually I don't have an image on here for that. And I have had craniosacral done, and it's actually absolutely beautiful. You sit there while somebody basically gives you a scalp massage. I know I'm really minimising it, but the idea is that they balance the brain fluid inside the skull or around the skull and the brain. Anyway, it's a very nice experience to have. Bowen therapy is another one. A lot of people don't realise that, actually. A lot of people that will go to Bowen and think that they're going to something like the chiropractor, which is probably not that different either. It's somewhere between a chiro and massage, but either way, that's another energy balancer. Acupuncture also seeks to balance the yin and yang of the body and the energy fields. Breath work is another way of balancing the chakras and your energy fields. Now, here's the big one, because I think this is quite funny, actually. Your chiropractor. If you go to a chiropractor, they're also traditionally what's called an energy healer. And this is one of the reasons why chiropractors have often been referred to as quacks by mainstream doctors. It took a long time for them to be recognised by medical professionals, and some doctors still don't acknowledge them as being genuine medical professionals. And I will never ever forget, because I think this is a funny story to share with you. My mother was very fearful of anything to do with metaphysical stuff, and my sister contacted me and told me that she'd sent our mother to a chiropractor. And I said, "You did what?" And I said, "You didn't tell her, did you, that, he's an energy worker?" Well, actually, I'll give you the whole story. What happened was my sister phoned me up to say to me that she'd sent Mum to a chiropractor because she had a sore back, and Mum had been seeing him for quite a while. And one day she came back and she happened to mention to my sister, "I really, really like this one. He's really good. He never ever says to me, make an appointment at such and such a time. He just says to me when I leave," she said, "I asked, should I make an appointment for next week?" And he goes, "You'll know when you need to come back." She said, "And I like that about him. He's not trying to fleece me for money." I laughed. I turned around and said to my sister, "Oh my God." I said, "This guy is a true energy worker. He's a healer." And she said, "Yeah, I know." I said, "Does Mum know that?" She says, "Don't be silly." She said, "We're not telling Mum that. She won't go anymore. She'll be too frightened." Anyway, so I would just go as far as say some chiropractors can still cop a load of flack. I'm not sure within modern days that a chiropractor would refer to themselves as an energy healer, or even if they know, because time changes. I'm going back probably about 20 years then when I had that conversation. I'm not sure that even the modern chiropractor recognises or is aware that their work directly relates to the chakras and the auras and that kind of thing. They do pay attention to the skeletal system, and they will crack, obviously. But that alignment, that cracking and alignment and that kind of stuff has a flow-on effect to the chakras. So anyway, back to it. When I was taught Reiki, I did have some very good teachers. And I'm well aware that while Reiki is a Japanese healing modality, where Westerners are concerned, and I'll just revisit the concept of the word master, it can be impressive to Westerners, but the reality is that my understanding is that the word master is not a Japanese word, so it doesn't translate. It's not part of their language. So no Japanese Reiki practitioner is actually going to refer to themselves as a master. They might call themselves an adept. Perhaps there's a language translation there. There are more qualifications. I'm just looking at my notes here. Oh, looking at my notes, okay. Where I'm going with this is when it comes to the qualifications, which I outlined at the front of the slide for myself, my own skill base, if you like, I do more than just Reiki. I also do colour therapy. I've done, and I do actually do angel healing. God, I'm quite a private person, actually. I have, learned a lot of these skills, but my skill base is not only on healing. Obviously, once you start working with healing energy and raising your vibration, you create a nice solid space and foundation to develop your psychic abilities and your communication with your guides and that kind of thing. So part of my journey has been obviously starting to learn how to use energy, and then I went along and I developed my own communication with my guides to the point where actually I can now deliver what is called guided messages, and I do use tools when I'm doing that. I might pick up a crystal, I might do readings from crystals, I might actually use colours, I will use what I'm drawn at the time, but generally tarot is probably my favourite form of communicating messages, and that's because we're always in a cycle of ongoing development, and where some people can channel automatically, like the person is sitting beside them, like the spirit sitting beside them. While I do have clear audio, it's not that well developed, and I find that my tarot cards are my speakers, if you like, because it kind of speaks to my heart. It's very difficult to translate and to put this stuff into words. But yes, so I do rely on tools when it comes to communicating messages from the other side. So we're going to be talking about Reiki specifically as a healing modality here, where the other modalities can be traced back directly in one way or another to the Vedas or the Sanskrit or Buddhism. Reiki's different, okay? So frankly, I'm not convinced that we will ever know the full story about the history of Reiki beyond how it arrived in the West. But what I will do here is share with you some of my understandings that I'm aware of based on my own experiences and studies as well. It's number one, it's from Japan, so therefore it cannot possibly be a product directly of Hinduism or Buddhism in any specific form. However, there is a but, because there is Tibetan Reiki, of course, which I have that qualification as well. The construction of the title Reiki Master, as just discussed, is a Western concept because of the translation aspects. I personally don't use it because I believe it conveys a level of superiority, as though the person that's doing the teacher is somehow better than other people, which is absolutely not the case. I may have used Reiki and energy for a few decades, but I am a believer that when we think we have mastered something, then we most likely will cease to grow and develop, and mastery is quite personal in my vocabulary as far as my opinion goes. I still believe that I am evolving and learning to master myself. I'm certainly nobody else's master. Now, given that I'm quite earthy and I like to apply rationale and logic to my understandings of spirit and energy, which, by the way, some people will judge me for, but do I care? Not at all, right? I can look at, for example, from a rational perspective and see that Christ as a teacher grew up within the Jewish faith, and that there are certain Christian practices that directly relate to the Jewish faith, such as the belief in the Old Testament. I can look at the Buddhists, of course, who follow obviously the practices of Buddha, but a lot of the Buddhist practices are actually from the Hindu faith, because Buddha was actually born into an ancient Indian royal family, although he grew up in the Nepal or Nepal region. So his personal belief systems will be influenced by Hinduism. Now, the reasons why I'm referring to this is because when it comes to our own individual journey, Buddha and Christ also, they have been born into something. This is my obviously interpretation of it, and I'm probably bound to offend a few Christians with this, but I guess that the Buddhists probably would potentially not be offended. But either way, when we start our spiritual journey, we draw upon our understandings that we have, and we start to question our belief systems, and we expand upon them and we evolve them. And I believe that we can actually see this by looking at the teachings of Buddha. We can see where his teachings relate directly to Hinduism, and we can also see where the teachings of Christ relate directly to his Jewish faith that he was brought up in. Now, as far as Muhammad goes, with the Islam, I'm no expert on this. This is just interesting information that I've managed to find. Muhammad was born in Mecca to a wealthy trader family. Now, as I say, I'm open to correction here. My understanding is that he would have been raised in either Arabic polytheism or as a Jew or as a mix of both because of the culture of the land in which he was living, or where Mecca was at the time. What would I say? I think it's probably more likely that he had a blended or leaning towards the Jewish faith, because my understanding is too that the Muslims refer to the Old Testament, but the Old Testament is called different names. Let me think on that one for a moment. I had to pull my brain back. I lost it. Okay, so my understanding is that the Jewish people refer to the Old Testament as the Torah, and the Muslims or Islamic people refer to the Quran's a secondary book to the Old Testament. Okay, I'm no expert on that. If you know the answer to that, let me know, right? But either way, there is a shared faith or belief within both of these religions. Now, actually, interestingly, on that note, I did see a channel where somebody was doing a little research project of their own, and they weren't asking the Muslims, they were actually going around Israel and asking Jews whether or not the Islamic people and they prayed to the same God, and the answer was yes. So there is a shared thing there. And interestingly, what I find interesting anyway, but maybe I'm just easily amused, what I saw was that the Jews weren't sure what the Christians prayed to because of their belief in Jesus. So each to their own. Anyway, I'm moving along. The point I'm coming to is that Reiki differs during the fundamental founding of Reiki, okay? Because at the end of the day, anything that we do like this, as much as a lot of alternative practitioners, they don't like to acknowledge that their practices are based on religion, but they actually are. Okay, and that includes Reiki. Reiki's its own kind of religious practice, you know? But Reiki is different because it was founded in Japan, and I'm going to go into this on the next slide. The next slide will be a better way to approach it. So I forgot to mention on the previous slide that Reiki aims to embody this paragraph here. These are the principles of Reiki, that, you know, we will not act in anger, that we will not subject ourselves to worry, that we will practice gratitude, that we will do work honestly, and that we will be kind to every living thing. Okay, so what I'm going to do in this slide is refer to what we know in the West of Reiki, and I would say that it is, while it's got Buddhist influences, this is due to location where Dr. Usui grew up. Reiki is the product of what we call earth-based religions, and it was founded along the lines of the traditional Japanese religions. Some people may already know this stuff, okay? The person that we in the West acknowledge as being the founder of Reiki is actually Dr. Usui here. Now, I think that's probably a little ambitious maybe. I'm not sure Dr. Usui would be comfortable having been called the founder of it, because while he would have been raised under the influences of the Shinto teachers, which is a religion based on polytheism, all right, I'll talk about Shintoism. So in the first instance, there is more than one branch of Reiki, and this wasn't initially known. When I was being told, I was under the understanding that there was only Dr. Usui's form of Reiki, and then I learned about Tibetan. I was attuned to Tibetan, and then at some point along the way, I learned that there's actually about 13 different branches of Reiki out of Japan, and then it reached a point where people said, look, don't even try and put a number on it, because there's multiple branches. We don't know how many. So anyway, going back to Dr. Usui, he will have been raised under the influences of Shinto teachers. Where Shinto is concerned, it's based on polytheism. This is the respect of sacred spirits that take form. I'll just look at my notes here. Right. They take the form of things, right? And they're related to wind and rain, mountains, trees, rivers, fertility, right? Now, when we come to the Irish traditions, now obviously I'm Irish descent, we might call them fairies and nymphs and elementals. For the Shinto people, the sun also plays an important role, and the sun goddess is believed to be the most important. Now, a key factor here with Shintoism, from my understanding, once again I say always open to correction, is that where they talk about the spirits, the Japanese refer to it as a kami. So, or I think it's a kami, maybe it's a kami, I don't know. Sacred spirit, all right? So for the Japanese Shinto, the sun goddess is the most important one. Now, part of the practices of Shintoism is that they go to what it could be, I think there's a number of them, once again, no expertise here, sacred mountains, and they go into the mountains and they try to connect with the mountain goddess Kami. I'm going to stick with the word Kami, right? Now, Shintoism is said to have coexisted with Buddhism, and this is the point that I make, that I believe that there's a blend of religious backgrounds here for Usui, because from about the 6th century, I think it was AD, Buddhism coexisted with Shintoism. Now, there is also another influence upon Usui, and that predates both Buddhism and Shintoism, and it's called, if my pronunciation is correct, Shugendo. Now, what can I add to that? Just simply, I think at this point in time that Shugendo was a practice of the people that lived in the mountains. It was the traditional religion of Japan. So as always, I'm going somewhere with these slides if people can hang into it, right? So as I said, Shugendo predates both Buddhism and Shinto as a Japanese religion. And according to Miyake Hitoshi, Shugendo is full of rituals, which includes festivals, fortune-telling, divination, prayers, incantations, exorcism, spells, charms, and so forth, right? I'm not quite sure who Hitoshi is, but you can go and do a Google on that. I'm going to read a direct passage that I copied here, that Shugendo assumes the existence of at least 2 realms of existence, that of the daily lives of human beings, and then a separate supernatural spiritual realm that is behind it. And that supernatural spiritual realm controls that of the daily lives of the human being. So we can say that we're being divinely guided. This is how I interpret it within the Western context. This is the duality that we talk about. And then the other thing is that the mountains are seen as a sacred space, which is part of both of these worlds, or it is seen to actually be a part of the spiritual world. So for the Japanese people, such as Usui, it would mean going to the mountains to find that divine connection. Now, that can be translated to, I believe, the Native American practices of a vision quest. It's quite similar to that. Within this culture, though, there would be a fire ceremony that's part of creating that sacred space. Now, the other thing that, and this translates across religions, I've seen it in Indonesia and other places, that when they enter the mountain, because that's a sacred space, it is traditional to take flowers or to go and read, is it sutras, whatever chanting I would put that down to, in honor of the various deities, So you would enter this sacred space on the mountain for a certain period of time, which is considered to be a retreat, and you would do various practices to receive your esoteric knowledge and to have your initiations. Now, that also translates over to Hinduism, by the way, because if we look at what happens with Tantra masters and this kind of thing, they do those retreats as well. And the idea is that they get themselves into a position where they download and channel the higher level information through to them. Now, this is my interpretation of how I read these words, right? Is that when it comes to the retreats, and I guess a commitment and dedication to faith and practice would be for the Japanese to go up in the wintertime and do the retreat on the mountains then, and you'll see why in a minute. Well, this image here actually gives you a good example as to why it would be the harshest. Can you imagine, honestly, looking at this photo, this is what they would do. I wouldn't want to be hanging over a cliff with somebody holding my feet, certainly in the middle of winter. But either way, this is part of their practice and commitment. And I see the relevance here when we know Usui's story. And I'm going to talk to that in a moment. So this image here on this slide, this is a picture of Hawaya. I hope I pronounce her name right, Hawaya Takato. Now, she's credited with bringing Reiki to the Western world, and she was taught by Usui. There's other people involved before we get to this stage, by the way, and I'm talking about within Japan. But I think instead of talking about her and the other elements or aspects of Reiki as I know it, I would save that for when I start actually delivering Reiki attunements as part of educating people and giving them understanding. What I will do, though, is for this slide, so look, based on what we've already discussed within the Western context and part of teaching Reiki here in Australia, for example, or the UK or the US, they are inclusive of ideas around retreat. There is a regard for nature. There's the honour of the spirit elements and a creator god or goddess. Really, it's really quite personal what and how we believe, because Reiki actually doesn't dictate what a person should believe or how they should demonstrate their faith. Rather, Reiki respects and acknowledges a person's journey as their own individual journey, and what is true for them is true for them. Might not be true for everybody else, but it helps a person to find their own personal and individual truth through teaching them how to use energy to find that truth. So from my perspective, to be honest, it does include aspects of magic, as some people would define it, through activities such as, these are not dictated, by the way, this is my personal truth, this is what I do and how I use or how I apply this stuff in my life. I do use ritual, which is like creating an altar, and I will burn off incense and light candles and stuff like that. That's a ritual, right? I do invocation, which is also called divine decree. And I do try to put focus on gratitude and kindness and the connection between all living things. We are all interrelated. So let's go back to the history of Reiki in the 20th century. Let me just think on that for a moment. Okay, so within the Western context, what I've seen, obviously, is the term master used quite a lot. I almost choked when I saw the term grandmaster. I thought, oh my God, I think a lot of that has actually been dropped now. I think that perhaps the modern Western Reiki teachers recognise that labels such as master and grandmaster are pretty egotistical, and they do convey a sense of superiority to the people around them. But what I will say is that my teachers have been Western, and they've offered different things to me. They've expanded my knowledge base differently in different ways, and all I can say is actually I'm very grateful for them, the people that have come into my life and taught me and shared me their skill base and that kind of thing, so that I could find my own truth. And basically, when I teach Reiki, that's what I teach people as well, is to find their own truth, find what works for them, and find their way of communicating, find their way to feel good. And for every person that I've ever taught, I actually have learned from them as well. So I wouldn't even go as far as saying that my teachers have simply been those people that have got a level 3 Reiki. I've actually done a lot of learning from people that haven't even done Reiki attunements. The universe takes you to the right person at the right time. So within the context of my experience of learning and becoming attuned to doing Reiki, and my initial stories, shall we get, I'll just go into it, okay? The first story that I got told when I was doing my Reiki training was that Dr Usui, he went and did his own mountain retreat. There's that link to Shugendo that I was talking about. And that while he was out there, he was struck by lightning, and after that he was able to hear the voice of God. Something like that was what I was told. Now, I'm a cynic, okay? I used to be a cynic. I struggled with that, and I thought, oh my God, well, honestly, having been raised a Catholic, if I can believe the Christian and Catholic principles, what's so outlandish about a man walking out onto a mountain being struck by lightning? Anyway, where I'm going with this is, before you actually turn this off, is that's not actually quite the correct story as I now understand it. My understanding now is that Usui, right, I've learned more about the man, was a very successful and well-travelled businessman, but in his mid-40s, he felt that something was lacking and he wanted to find his life purpose. And I love the humanity of this story. So apparently he took a mountain retreat. There again, Shugendo and Shintoism. And in the process, he apparently meditated. And I would define it based on what I've read, that he got to that peaceful, energetic state that most people aspire to get to when we're meditating, right? Where everything is really beautiful. You feel that inner peace and connection. So you know that there is more than you. You just know that it feels nice when you're in that state, but you're not actually feeling like you're receiving any guidance or information or direction around your purpose in life. And the way his story is defined is he was not able to access his intuition and guidance, and he became very frustrated. So he sought the services of a Zen teacher, and he continued with his meditation practice regularly for probably about another 3 years or so before he decided that nothing was working, and he was getting older and he still didn't know his purpose. So apparently he went back and he saw his Zen teacher, who told him that he needed to take a more extreme approach to demonstrate his commitment to finding his purpose, and that would involve a willingness to die to be able to access his guidance, which, I've got to be honest, sounds a bit extreme to me. But anyway, the story goes further. It's that he prepared for his death. He decided that he was going to go up onto the most sacred mountain in Japan, and that he was going to fast and meditate until he died. All right, which is pretty well what he did, except that he didn't die. So apparently by day 21, now, as I say, hey, I'm a cynic too, right? If somebody didn't eat for 21 days, we can expect that they probably would die. I believe that a person can only last for 3 weeks without food at the longest before they snuff it, right? But anyway, according to the story, is by day 21, instead of dying, he received a bolt of light, not lightning, a bolt of light through the top of his crown chakra, and that it came through so forcefully that he was knocked unconscious. Now, once you have experienced energy, as I have, I don't have a problem believing that bit, okay? I don't know about the day 21, but certainly energy like a bolt of lightning through the top of the crown chakra, yep, I don't have a problem with that. But either way, he was knocked unconscious, according to the story. And when he woke up or became conscious, his body was apparently abuzz with energy, and he had his life purpose. He knew what he was meant to do, and his purpose was to teach people how to heal. And apparently he was able to recognize this because his hands were still buzzing. And because when he'd been knocked unconscious, apparently he had a bit of a fall and he hurt his foot or something like that. So he was able to touch his own foot and heal it. So either way, he must have been in a weakened state, but he made his way back down the mountain, and he had his purpose. So I realise this all sounds very fantastical, but I actually do ask you to stay with it, or stay with this video, because I think you're going to find some humour in this. When you think about, I'm talking to you about this stuff now, I'm pretty sure you can tell by my voice that I'm very earthy and practical as well. So I had a real issue with this stuff, but you will laugh at my experience and my ignorance as I started my conscious pathway, if you like. So let's be real, let's get back to it. Every single religion of faith, be it Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, or whatever you want to call it, is underpinned by some amazing story of miracle and magic or spirit communication, prophecy, right? So for our Christian friends, remember, you get told, in the face of danger or fear, you are encouraged to call or pray in the name of Jesus Christ, and that brings magic to whatever's going on for you. That's a divine decree. That's an invocation. You can call it prayer if you want. I don't know what all the other approaches do, but I do know that with Reiki, it does involve an attunement process. As I say, just hang in there, buttercup, right? You will laugh eventually at me and my ignorance. I'm going to say, look, you can do your own research on Usui. I would encourage you to do that. So when it comes to the Reiki, the important facts is I did get told right at the get-go, you don't need to believe in it for it to work. You know, once you're attuned, right? This is what I was told. And I thought, oh yeah, whatever. Okay, as you do. Reiki does use symbols. Reiki 1 is considered to be hands-on. And back in the day when Usui came back off the mountain, he actually attuned entire villages because he believed it was important that they learn to heal themselves and their family members through the laying on of hands. Okay, so after that, he then started his own school where he taught people how to send healing over distance. This is distance energy healing, or Reiki 2, and he taught other people how to teach others, which is the Reiki 3. Now, my understanding includes that at his school, his approach was where he took on apprentices. And I put apprentices in inverted commas because I'm not sure that that's the correct word. But basically, it was a matter of training them. People did pay. I believe they did pay to learn or to become an apprentice. I'm not sure 100% on that. I do know when I visited Indonesia that the local village Brahmana, I think that's the correct name, he usually has a couple of people working under him that he's training up to be his replacement when he eventually passes over to the other side. And anyway, I would envisage that would be similar to what happened with the original Reiki schools. Okay, just want to make mention of the symbols here. That symbol that I've got on there, that's not the actual symbol, and I haven't put the name of it. And I do see symbols all over the internet. Now, my understanding is that these symbols are sacred, and I got told by my teachers that you didn't squander them around or misuse the words or whatever because you wanted them to retain their power. I don't know how I feel about seeing them all over the internet, because I also am a believer that what we think or believe to be true is what we create. So therefore, if we believe in limitations, if we believe that looking at a symbol or having people that haven't been attuned looking at a symbol disempowers this symbol, to me that's limitation. So I don't know how I feel about that concept anymore. But anyway, that's not what the symbol looks like. Okay, it's similar, but not one of them. There's lots of symbols. That's similar to one of them. So I think this is where you're going to start laughing, okay? Because my Reiki journey, I got it thinking I was purchasing a bottle of oil because I was absolutely ignorant. I thought that when they said Reiki, they meant something like aromatherapy. I knew nothing at all about Reiki. I didn't even know the stuff that I've just told you. I just witnessed, in hindsight, what happened was I witnessed a miracle, and I was told how and why, and they said it's the Reiki. All right, so I was like, where can I get this from? Okay, and they said, call this guy. You can get Reiki through him. They obviously didn't realise how ignorant I was. I went, oh, okay then. So I went and I phoned him up, and he told me it was going to cost me about $250 to do it. And I thought, well, that's an expensive bottle, but, you know, it'll work out being viable over the long term. So I'll tell you what motivated me was I had a sick child, and I felt sorry for her. I had some mother guilt because I'd actually left her at home with a really hacking cough. I mean, I'd medicated her, but I was in a difficult position at the time and I had to go to a job interview. And so basically, I did the thing where you leave your child at home with the phone and you just say, call me if it gets really bad, I'll take you up to the hospital. But I'm going to go to this job interview and hopefully get the job, because I needed it. I just split up with my husband and stuff like that. So I left her at home for all of about 1.5 hours. And when I got back from the job interview, she still wasn't looking very well. And I said, look, let's go to the doctors. I'll make you an appointment. Because I figured she must have been in incredible pain with this ongoing coughing. So we went to the local New Age shop and I saw a sign up saying Reiki. And one of the ladies there said, Lorena, shall I... Oh, no, it wasn't Reiki. Casting my mind back, got to tell the true story, not a made-up one. I went in there and it said massage, and I thought, you know what, maybe she could do with having a little bit of a shoulder rub or something like that, enjoy the tactile, it might help with her chest and that kind of thing, or her back or the muscle pain and that. So I actually asked the lady there if she would be fine to give my daughter a massage. And the lady said, no worries. So she took her into her room. My daughter wanted to go in on her own anyway, and she was fine about going in. She knew that I was waiting outside. Anyway, when she came out, she wasn't coughing anymore. It was all gone. I mean, she was only going a couple of seconds between a coughing spasm before she went in and got this massage done. And the lady brings her out, and I said, well, when did she stop coughing? And she said, oh, about 5 minutes into it. I went, oh my God, she's been coughing like for nearly 24 hours. And the lady said, oh, that'll be the Reiki. So as I said, I thought, well, I've got 3 asthmatic children. I think I need to get some of this Reiki stuff because it cost me a fortune in Ventolin and nebulizers. And if it works this quickly, it works better and more effectively than what the Ventolin does. So as I said, the next step was I phoned up the guy. I paid him. Decided that it was worth it because 3 asthmatics over a few years is going to add up to a lot of money. And so I hope that you're recognizing here where my expectations were when I arrived on the evening, especially when I was told that I couldn't just go in there and purchase. I don't think I ever said the word bottle. I phoned up, I said, when do I get it and how do I get it? And he said, well, I'm going to be at such and such a place and you'll need to come. There's 4 sessions or whatever. Now, whatever it was, I've just gone, oh God, obviously I've got to go through this to get to this. Didn't understand what I was doing. But I was frustrated because it meant that I had to get babysitters. But anyway, so I've rocked up. And this is where you guys, I think, will get the biggest laugh. This is me turning up completely ignorant and completely skeptical and not into this stuff at all. So I've done what we call rocking up on the night to meet the guy who was going to give me the Reiki. It sounds almost like a bit of a drug deal, really. Not like that at all, actually. But when I've got in there, I've had to go into this room where there's about 4 other people waiting, and there's this tinny music going on, all very nice. I didn't mind that. The candles and the aromatherapy are happening. Oh, that's very nice. But really, muted lighting. It was like, what have I let myself in for? And then there's photos of Dr Usui everywhere and the 4 principles. And it was at this point alarm bells are going off, and I'm thinking, what have I let myself in for? And then sort of telling myself, keep an open mind, right? Don't be judgmental, right? Because I was thinking, I am in with a bunch of lunatics, right? And it was on me. I wanted to leave and go home. But then because I'm a bit of a tight fist, I thought to myself, look, you've paid the $250. You might as well stick here because he's already told you you're not going to get a refund. Throughout that process, he did actually have to lay his hands on me, which I found was an invasion of my personal space, actually, because I was totally unprepared for where I was going with this. And it was totally outside my world and comfort zone. Okay, so long story short, I endured it all. I felt that I was insane for actually going. I felt that I was insane for paying the money. But I figured, as I said, may as well complete the process. I didn't believe it for a second. And I got told all the different ways that this magic could be used. And I was given a manual And I thought to myself, what a load of bollocks, right? But of course, I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings, and I could see that everybody else was right into it and that it was quite a profound experience for everyone else. So I just shut up and did the right thing. And fortunately for them, they did say to me, you don't need to believe it for it to work. So when I had my first miracle, it was at a stage where I was a complete unbeliever, okay? I was woken and also didn't believe it was a miracle, I might add, for another few weeks. But either way, I was woken in the night a few weeks after having my attunement done. My son was having an asthma attack, actually, and it hadn't gone too far into it. He was just at the coughing stage, and I could hear, as any mother of an asthmatic knows, you can hear it's picking up, and you're like, oh, this is going to mean a hospital trip, right? I had forgotten to pick up Ventolin, and my nebulizer wasn't working. I needed to replace my nebulizer. So all I could think when I've woken up in the middle of the night completely fatigued is like, oh my God, this is going to be a hospital trip. I'm going to have to get the other two kids out of bed. I'm going to have to rug them all up. It's winter and we'll be up at the hospital for hours in the middle of the night. I'd got that job, so I was very weary. So instead I thought to myself, you know what, this Reiki stuff's supposed to work whether you believe in it or not. And I thought, right, I'll put him into bed with me and I'll give it a test. And if his chest doesn't settle quickly, then I've still got enough time to get to the hospital without being a negligent parent kind of thing. So anyway, I've got him. I've put him into bed with me. I've figured, let's try that Reiki crap out, as you do. I've got him to face the other side from me and to put his back towards me because I was so honestly, I cannot. Look, I don't want to go too far into this, but I was exhausted. So I've laid my hands on his back in the bed and very quickly he stopped coughing. His asthma settled and he went to sleep. And I thought, well, that's really good. I don't have to go to the hospital now. And instead of crediting Reiki with it, I thought, oh, yeah, it's psychosomatic. It just made him feel better. My room's warmer or whatever. I made excuses as a skeptic will do. I was not convinced that Reiki works, but I was very grateful to have a good night's sleep. And I'm pretty sure he was too. So I must say it's with no great pride that I share the next story, the second miracle. Just in my defense, yes, I was absolutely exhausted, continually fatigued at this time. And it happened within a few weeks of the other incident, the first miracle. I'd been dealing obviously with psychological abuse and harassment from my ex-husband, plus working and looking after 3 children, very busy children, okay? So the second miracle occurred when my then 9-year-old daughter came into my bedroom in the morning, and I think it must have been a weekend in hindsight because I recall we didn't have to rush anywhere. But either way, she calls out to me and I do my typical mother thing, is like, in a minute, I'll be up in a moment. I just need to get out of bed and have my coffee, before I deal with this stuff or whatever. So she, sweet little thing, has turned around and says, okay, mummy, I'll make you a coffee. And I'm like, no, calling out from the bed, slumbersome, no, that's all right. Mum will be up in a moment. She'll make the coffee. But then I could hear her rattling in the kitchen. I thought, she's not listening to me because obviously the children didn't listen to me a lot all the time anyway back in those days. But I'm like, so I've put in a little, I guess you would say, tokenistic effort of like, no, don't worry about it, in the knowledge that she actually was in the kitchen. I knew that she was boiling the kettle, right? So this is why I say I've got no great sense of pride with this particular activity. Anyway, naturally, of course, yes, she poured scalding hot water, boiling hot water down her forearm. And of course, I knew straight away from the scream, I knew that it was bad. And I ran into the kitchen. I could see that the whole area from her wrist to her elbow had turned bright red because she must have just poured the water actually down the length of her arm. So, of course, the first thing that you do when you're in those situations is you think about immediate first aid. What am I going to do? Put ice on it or whatever. And then somewhere my brain went, bing, Reiki's apparently works really well for a burn. It worked for the asthma. Maybe I should give this a shot. So obviously the first thing I did was shove her arm under the water, and I was thinking, this is a hospital trip, right? Because I could see that it was starting to rise and blister and that kind of thing. So I've grabbed her, I sat her on my lap, and I was holding her very tight towards me because obviously she was in a lot of pain. And I laid both of my wrists. I might actually try and put as I record this, I don't have an image. I'm going to put an image up here so that you can see it was like one hand behind the other. And I've laid my hands on her inner arm, which is where the bulk of the burn was. And I just felt terrible, right? I was wincing with pain as I was putting it on her because she literally was screaming with pain as well from the hands. And I called out to my other daughter to grab the phone so I could call up my Reiki teacher and ask her if I was doing something wrong, because poor little girl was in so much pain. And I was like, I think I need to take her to the hospital. But I've got to say, actually, while this was happening, I didn't keep my hands solidly on her arm. I was lifting them up and down on her arm because in the back of my mind, I was also scared that my hands would fuse with the skin of her arm. Sorry, I hope I'm being not too graphic for you if it got that bad. But anyway, look, the long story short of it is that my daughter, the other one, was holding the phone out to me while my Reiki teacher's saying, for God's sake, you haven't put your hands directly on the wound, have you? And I'm like, yeah, I have. She's going, you don't need to. I'm like, okay, so I took my hands off. And I was thinking about taking her to the hospital, but at that point she seemed to calm down. And then I just was putting the water and the ice on. Now, what I did notice, and this is why I say it's a miracle, I believe this is a second miracle, is because she actually recovered from this very quickly once my hands had come off. And I was able to see, probably for the next 48 hours, that where her forearm, I'm just not sure if I'm able to draw this as a graphic picture, where the bulk of the burn would have been from the wrist across the meaty fleshy part of the forearm on the inside, and then towards the elbow there was less. It was a fainter pink when I first if you like started doing first aid, so it was reddest in the middle. Okay, so that was where I concentrated my attention with laying on of the hands and the Reiki. And what I found to be really interesting is for the next 48 hours, where I'm going with this is there was 2 white handprints on my daughter's forearm over that bit which had been the reddest, and where the tops of my fingers hadn't reached towards her elbow, there was just this tiny little pink area that had just a couple of little blisters, not really bad, just a couple of little blisters where my hands hadn't reached. And that was actually it. That was when after that, it was like, how do you explain that? I don't know how you explain that. She didn't need any pain-killing medication. She was back playing, and within about half an hour and carrying on. I mean, I just found it to be incredible. I'm going to put a disclaimer to the end of this, right? Because as much as this sounds like a miracle, and I believe it to be a miracle, it's very, very important, I think, for people to understand that there are times when we see miracles and times when we don't. And I would never encourage a person to rely on Reiki alone. Okay, so if my daughter's symptoms had not reduced, I would have had her up to the hospital in a flash, is where I'm going. In hindsight, what I learned, because remember, I just learned, in hindsight, I wouldn't have put my hands directly on a forearm. I would discourage that, just stuff like that. But I mean, if I decide to go down the pathway of teaching people how to use Reiki, these are the skills and tidbits you're going to learn from it. So as for the third miracle, I'm actually not going to share it with you because it just sounds too incredulous in the telling. What I will say, it was after the third miracle that I became not just a believer, but a convicted, if you like, or an understander. I knew at a core level and believed this stuff to be true. So what I will also add here is that after the third experience, they became more often, more regular, and even more fantastic at different times. I've had some truly amazing experiences. In fact, I had so many, I became so impressed with the use of Reiki and healing energy that I took risks that I didn't need to. So that were probably misinformed risks, for want of a better word. So what I would say to people, I've got to add a caution in here, that it is important for people who are attuned to Reiki or planning to do Reiki to know is that I would never ever advise anyone to deviate from professional health care. So while the miracles that I observed demonstrate what can happen in very positive ways, I'm also fully aware that sometimes Reiki will work for people and sometimes it doesn't, Or, for instance, using my own experiences as well, I have a condition called Hashimoto's, which is an immune disorder, metabolic. And after I had made my observations and been exposed to the first miracles, if you like, I stopped taking the medication. And I hadn't taken it for about a year because I was under this delusion that I was going to pop into my doctor's surgery and tell him, my Perth doctor, because I was living bush, and say to him, hey, look at me. I no longer have Hashimoto's. I'm cured. It's the Reiki has done it. Anyway, the reality was a little bit different. I ended up going to Perth for whatever reasons, family reasons. And when I arrived, I thought, okay, time to go and visit my Perth GP, the one that I had before I went bush. And I made my appointment. I turned up. I got my bloods done. I was fully expected to get back, you're cured. But instead, what I got was a phone call saying, you need to get your backside in here right now. And you need to start preparing your family because you're going to hospital, right? Your thyroid is non-functioning. It is X, Y, and Z. We need to do more tests. We need to test your vitamin levels. We need to test your mineral levels. And we're probably going to have to give you blood transfusions. This is what I got from the phone call, because your thyroid is not functioning. Okay, so that was when I was informed that you can actually die from a thyroid condition. Nobody had ever told me before that, right? So I think what you can pick up from here, that the Reiki, and I was doing a lot of Reiki energy, didn't cure my immune condition. But where I will say within this, what was very interesting, and so I still think that there was a miracle of sorts that occurred with this, was I went back to the doctors as told that day. I didn't have to pack my bags for hospital. He told me I could have the night at home with the kids and then go to hospital the next day, but I needed to get up so they could do the blood test that afternoon. So, of course, I've blown into the doctor's surgery. I've had all these blood tests done, and they fast-tracked them all because it was considered to be pretty critical. Anyway, what they got was that I was not deficient in any minerals or vitamins whatsoever. I wouldn't need to have intravenous top-ups. And the doctor said, well, you could take some iron tablets if you want to. But he really stressed upon me, you can die from this. You can't be haphazard with your medication. So I would say lesson learned. I've tried not to forget my medication over the years, and I've just accepted that Hashimoto's is a part of my life, and that's the end of it. So the point being, I would not advise anybody to take risks like this. And in hindsight, if I was to do something like that again, I would at least make sure that I kept my doctor in the loop so that the bloods were being done regularly as a backup check. So there's no rhyme nor reason for why it works. I have theories myself on why it works sometimes for some people and why it doesn't for other people and other conditions and that kind of stuff, but they're mine. And I would let other people make their own decisions or reach their own conclusions. So for those who are interested in my energy journey or the metaphysical progress of my life, so to speak, after the attunements, the first one happened in year 2000. After I started to make these observations, I became very hungry for extra knowledge and awareness and to grow my vibration levels, to connect directly with my guides and to have that one-to-one capacity to communicate with them for messages for myself. The universe just opened so many doors. At the time that I'd gone down to Perth, as I said, where my thyroid was completely malfunctioning, well, was it my thyroid? Yes, it was, actually. Let's be real. Okay, so at that time, obviously, I was down in Perth and I was staying with my sister, and because we didn't have access to metaphysical type places in the bush where I was living, we ended up visiting a lot of places. And what I will say is the energy journey, it was like my guides were trying to cram as much in as they could in a short space of time. And every single place we went to, I was exposed to a different form of healing, and where people that were making a living out of doing healings on people, they would come up to me because obviously I was broke at the time. I was a single mother and that. And they would just come up to me out of the blue, tap me on the shoulder and say, look, I'm being guided to give you a healing. I had so many healings in such a short space of time that I actually experienced drumming healing. I was given a crystal attunement. I was told, because the lady that gave me the crystal healing told me that she was being guided to teach me and explain to me how to use crystals and this kind of thing, because I needed it for my practice, which she actually was quite correct, to be honest. So yeah, I was introduced all of these things, which is the healing with color and sound and that kind of thing. And then I met other Reiki teachers who taught me the Sekem and Kundalini Reiki, amongst other ones. I was introduced to angels, and angelic healing, which was absolutely incredible and I love. And yeah, so anyway, it's just been onwards and upwards. Now, with Kundalini Reiki, that's actually a fascinating form of Reiki, but you've got to be at a certain level before you do this particular attunement. When I say level, that's not about being better than anyone else. It's about being able to have gone through that process of raising your energy to a certain level, certain speed, to be able to use the Kundalini. And so what people often get confused about when they speak with me, for example, I'm having a video here and I'm talking to you. I'm not channeling right now. I'm not trying to do a reading. I'm not open as far as being opening up to give divine messages or anything like that. People talk to me and they hear a very earthy, grounded person, because that is who I am. Okay, when I'm delivering services, I channel and I go into a state, and that is with my whether I'm delivering tarot messages or spirit communication or whatever. What I do is I use the energy at those times, so I open and close for services. And Kundalini, I can honestly say that the Kundalini Reiki is what has absolutely blown my third eye gifts open, if you like, and my ability to do psychic readings. And I actually just realised I need to acknowledge somebody, and I'll do that in the Sunday yarning, because I'm still earthy, I'm still grounded. There is that whole thing of separation, that we are one, as in ourselves, that we are, when we're at that high level or whatever and doing channeling, we are connecting with the divinity in ourselves. Now, for me, I open and close my gifts because I open for a purpose, and then I return to being earthy and earthly because I have an earthly role. And I don't think it's helpful if I'm out there with the fairies. So I open up. So yeah, whenever I'm opening up to do spiritual work, I always draw upon Kundalini Reiki, because I find it so very effective. But that's something that I would teach if I do attunements. So some of you, after listening to this, might be interested in doing a Reiki attunement. And invariably the question would be, Anna, are you going to do attunements? How can I get an attunement through you? Well, in the first instance, I've got to say I'm not doing them right now. For a very good reason. I need to work on my own personal energy, and I put this image up of the pure water coming out of that jug and into a beaker, because the best way to describe it is, I do not believe, this is just my thing, I do not believe that you can pour pure water from a dirty vessel. Okay, now I've got to raise my own vibration again. I feel I need to put some energy and effort into purifying myself before I start doing the Reiki attunements again, and I'm not sure when I will have done that. It's not too far in the future, but it will happen. I'm definitely thinking to myself, I've got to be doing it very soon, because I think there's a great need for people to be able to be empowered to access energy and heal themselves. But there is a process involved. It does require setting aside some time to do it. Knowing me, because I have this humanitarian concept and commitment, I will probably offer Reiki 1 for free. I know that's what I do. I won't be offering them for free for distance or Reiki teaching. I may not even go into Reiki teaching, but I certainly would consider doing Reiki 1 attunements to help people. But that will involve me, updating my literature, and that includes a manual. and providing mentoring and services to people that are attuned to help them get comfortable with what they're actually doing, and to give them strategies on when's an appropriate time to send, how to do decree, how to do invocation, and things like that. Anyway, that's a bit time consuming. So the chances are, if I don't offer them for free, I would imagine that it probably would be by donation or some tokenistic figure, so that it's accessible to everybody. Now, if you're in a rush and you don't want to wait until I'm ready to deliver, that's fine. I would suggest that you put it out to the universe that the perfect teacher arrives to you at the perfect time. And if money is an issue for you, you could also put the little thing on in a perfectly affordable way, all right? Because this is actually what I put out to the universe, and this is how I managed to get access to so many different modalities, if you like, of Reiki and energy healing. But in the meantime, I'm going to leave you to ponder and think about this. I really look forward to your feedback. I really hope that this video actually engages some of you enough to write a comment and give me feedback on your own thoughts, your own experiences. I just feel incredibly blessed anyway. So I'll crack on now. I'll get on to the other one about spiritual boundaries, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Lots of love. Bye-bye.